Millionaire throws rats at an 8-year-old boy. But doesn't know who the boy's mother is.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
The radiant afternoon sunlight bathed Union Square, where children's laughter filled the air as they played. Martin, an 8-year-old boy with jet black hair and bright eyes, was engrossed in a soccer game with his friends. The square seemed to revel in the peaceful afternoon, until an unwelcome figure appeared. Charles Mendoza, a middle-aged man dressed in a perfectly tailored suit and carrying a cold, imposing gaze, walked into the square. His name was infamous in the area not for admirable achievements, but for his arrogance and the power he wielded abusively. No one wanted to confront Charles, but this time, his appearance brought a nightmare for everyone present. Charles marched directly to the center of the square, where Martin and his friends were playing. The sound of his polished leather shoes striking the pavement echoed ominously. A few nearby adults began to take notice, sensing the unease radiating from his domineering posture. They didn't dare approach him, but their eyes followed his every move. "Hey, kid," Charles called out, his voice commanding. "You're Martin, aren't you?" Martin, laughing and joking with his friends, turned to look at the man. He couldn't understand how this stranger knew his name. "Why yes, that's me," Martin stammered, his voice trembling as he felt Charles's sharp gaze, like a hawk targeting its prey. Charles stepped closer, reducing the distance between them to mere feet. "So, I hear your mother loves speaking out against me at community meetings. Do you think you're as strong as she is?" Martin shook his head, unsure how to respond. The other children had backed away, their worried eyes fixed on the two of them. A few nearby parents considered intervening but hesitated, intimidated by Charles's power. "Well then," Charles sneered, his expression icy. "Let's see just how strong you are." He gestured to a man standing a short distance away, clearly one of his henchmen. The man approached, holding a sealed box. When the box was opened, horrifying squeals pierced the air. Inside was a swarm of baby rats, writhing and scrambling to escape the confines of the box. Charles showed no revulsion or hesitation as he took the box and moved closer to Martin. Before anyone could react, he abruptly flipped the box, releasing the rats onto the boy. Martin screamed in terror. The rats scurried all over him, their sharp claws tearing his clothes and scratching his skin. Some even bit his arms and legs, causing Martin such intense pain that he collapsed onto the pavement, tears streaming down his face. The crowd froze in shock, unable to believe what they were witnessing. A few men stepped forward to intervene, but Charles turned, his threatening gaze freezing them in their tracks. "Anyone who dares touch me will face serious consequences," he warned with a chilling tone. At that moment, a woman came running from afar. It was Lucy, Martin's mother. She had just finished a community meeting and arrived to pick up her son, only to find this horrific scene. Her face turned pale as she saw Martin curled up on the ground, with rats still clinging to him. "Martin!" Lucy screamed, rushing to her son's side. She frantically brushed the rats off his body, ignoring her own fear and disgust. "Are you okay? Where does it hurt?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of panic and anger. Charles stood there, arms crossed, a mocking smirk on his face. "Like mother, like son," he declared loudly. "All you can do is scream and cry. Do you think someone like you can stand against me?" Lucy turned to face him, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're a monster," she shouted. "How could you do this to a child?" Charles took a step forward, unfazed. "Remember your place, Lucy," he said coldly. "If you dare oppose me, this is only the beginning of what you and your boy will endure." The murmuring of the crowd grew louder, and some people began recording the incident on their phones. Among them was David Fernandez, a student who specialized in filming documentaries. He stood at a distance, capturing everything Charles did and Lucy's reaction. "You'll pay for this," Lucy said, her voice trembling with determination. Despite her fear, she refused to back down, even with Charles looming over her like a predator. Charles laughed, his cold chuckle echoing in the tense silence of the square. You think you can make me pay? You're just a weak, single mother, and I am Charles Mendoza. Lucy didn't respond immediately. She held Martin tightly, feeling the boy's trembling body in her arms. The people around them began to step closer, no longer keeping their distance, their anger building. Carmen Sanchez, a well-known music teacher in the area, stepped forward. Charles, you've gone too far. Don't think your power can hide everything. We've seen enough. Lucy tightened her grip on Martin, shielding him from Charles's venomous gaze. I'm not afraid of you, she said, her voice shaking not from fear, but from rage. Do you think you can intimidate and crush people forever? You will pay for this. Charles smirked, taking another step forward, his polished shoe striking the pavement with a resounding thud, as if to assert his absolute authority. Pay me? You're far too naive, Lucy. This is no playground for the weak. You and this little community can't do anything to me. Lucy didn't reply immediately. She glanced around, noticing the eyes of everyone fixed on her. Some were clearly frightened, but others radiated anger. People like Carmen and David stood firm, their eyes glinting with determination, ready to support Lucy no matter what. Stop this, Charles, Carmen said, stepping forward to stand between Charles and Lucy. What you did today is unacceptable, and everyone here has witnessed it. The truth won't stay buried forever. Charles let out a loud laugh, his voice echoing throughout the square. The truth? Do you really think some videos on a phone or your fabricated stories can do anything to me? I'll show all of you who truly controls this place. As soon as he finished speaking, Charles turned his sharp gaze to David, who was holding a small video camera. You there, hand that over, he commanded, his voice brimming with authority. David didn't move, clutching the camera tightly as if it were his most prized possession. No way, he replied, his voice calm but resolute. What you've done today won't be forgotten. I'll make sure of it. Charles took a step forward, ready to grab the camera, but James Ruiz, the neighborhood baker, stepped in just in time to block him. James, a tall man with strong, solid hands, stood firmly between Charles and David, his gaze steely. You won't be taking anything today, Charles, James said. No one here is afraid of you anymore. Charles hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The onlookers were no longer silent, they began to gather closer, forming a small circle around him. The murmurs grew louder, and the anger in the crowd became increasingly palpable. What do you think you're doing? Charles roared, his eyes darting around the group. Don't forget who I am. I can destroy all of you with a single phone call. Lucy stood up, her eyes blazing. You can't destroy the truth, Charles. Today, you've crossed the line. We won't stay silent anymore. Carmen nodded in agreement. That's right. Your days of abusing power and trampling over others are over. Everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are. Charles glanced around and realized that this time, the crowd's anger was beyond his control. Yet instead of backing down, he smirked. Fine. You want a fight? I'll show you what a fight looks like. He turned and walked away from the square, his pace slow but defiant. Before leaving, Charles turned back to Lucy, his eyes filled with hatred. Watch yourself, Lucy. I'll be back, and next time, it won't just be your weak little son. Charles's threat struck Lucy like a dagger, but she refused to let fear consume her. Instead, she turned to the community, who were looking at her with admiration and solidarity. We can't let him continue like this, Lucy said, her voice strong and clear. If we do nothing, he'll keep hurting others. We have to stand up. Carmen placed a reassuring hand on Lucy's shoulder and nodded. I'll help you. We won't let him get away with this. David stepped forward, holding up his camera. I recorded everything. This will be our first piece of evidence. I'll edit the video and post it online. People need to know the truth about Charles Mendoza. James also spoke up. I'll talk to everyone in the neighborhood. We can organize a meeting to figure out how to take him down. Lucy looked around, sensing the unity that was forming among the people gathered there. She knew this would be a tough fight, but she wasn't alone anymore. These people, her neighbors, her friends, would be the strength she needed to stand against Charles. Later that evening, Lucy sat silently in her small kitchen, gripping a glass of water in her hands, her eyes staring out the window. The image of Martin curled up in pain, tears streaming down his face, haunted her. The physical wounds on her son had been bandaged, but the wound in her heart continued to bleed. Charles Mendoza had not only threatened Martin's safety but also insulted her dignity and honor. Lucy knew that if she didn't act, he would keep hurting others. That night, as Martin fell asleep after a nightmare, Lucy examined the USB drive she had quickly snatched from Charles's pocket during the chaos. She wasn't sure what it contained, but her instincts told her it might hold the key to exposing the truth about this man. She plugged the USB into her old computer, her heart pounding. After a few seconds of loading, a series of files appeared on the screen. The files were neatly labeled with codes and dates, but what caught her attention was a folder named Confidential. Her hands trembled as she slowly moved the mouse and opened the folder. Inside were countless documents, images, and videos. Taking a deep breath, Lucy began to read. The text before her eyes detailed lists of illegal payments, shady contracts, and the names of individuals involved. Even more horrifying, some files contained information about violent incidents, including the death of Alfred, her late husband. The world seemed to spin around her. Lucy clutched her chest, struggling to hold back a sob. Her husband hadn't died in an accident, as everyone believed, but had been a victim of a dark conspiracy orchestrated by Charles. Anger and pain surged through her, and she couldn't sit still. She quickly copied all the data to an external hard drive for safekeeping. But Lucy knew she couldn't do this alone. Charles had power and allies lurking in the shadows, while she was just a single mother with an old computer and some incriminating files. The next morning, Lucy went to James Ruiz's bakery, a longtime friend and one of those who had defended her the day before. James was setting fresh bread on the counter when he looked up to see Lucy entering, her face tense with worry. "Lucy, is everything okay?" James asked, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No, James, I need your help," Lucy said, her voice low but filled with determination. "I found something that could be evidence against Charles. But I don't know what to do next." James frowned. "What kind of evidence? Are you talking about proof of his crimes?" Lucy nodded and explained everything she had found on the USB. James's expression darkened. "We'll need to be careful, Lucy. Charles isn't someone you can easily take down. But I'll help you. I know someone who can assist us." Carmen Sanchez, the neighborhood music teacher, was the name James mentioned. Carmen was not only a talented artist but also deeply involved in community activities. When she heard Lucy's story, she immediately agreed to help. "Charles hasn't faced anyone brave enough to stand up to him in a long time. But this time, we won't stay silent," Carmen said firmly. "We need to draw the community's attention. I can organize a fundraising concert to spread this story further." Lucy felt a spark of hope. "Thank you, Carmen. But we need more help. I've copied the data from the USB, but we need someone who can make it public effectively." David Fernandez was the first person Carmen thought of. The young college student, who had recorded the entire incident at the square, agreed to join the cause immediately when invited. After reviewing the data Lucy shared, his expression turned grave. "This is powerful evidence," David said. "If we release these videos and documents, Charles won't be able to hide anymore. I'll edit and upload them to social media platforms. That's where we'll start." Lucy's team slowly began to form, with each person taking on a role. Carmen started planning the concert, James reached out to neighbors to rally support, and David worked tirelessly on the videos and documents. Meanwhile, Lucy, though exhausted, kept track of every step the group took while also caring for Martin. But Charles was not someone who could be easily outmaneuvered. A few days later, the first signs of his retaliation began to appear. One evening, as Lucy was cleaning her kitchen, her phone rang. On the other end of the line was a cold, unfamiliar voice. "Do you really think you can do anything with that little bit of data? Stop now before it's too late." Lucy didn't flinch, but she knew this was only the beginning. Charles would do whatever it took to protect himself. However, she had no choice. For Martin, for Alfred, and for everyone Charles had harmed, Lucy was determined to see this through, no matter how dangerous the road ahead would be. Lucy sat alone in her small living room, the dim light casting shadows on the worn walls. The USB drive lay silently on the table, but her mind was far from quiet. The images and information she had seen replayed in her head like a relentless nightmare. Each document, every photo, and every video was like a knife piercing her heart. Every time she thought of Alfred, the pain in her chest intensified. Her husband hadn't died in an accident, as she had believed for years. He had been a victim of a horrifying conspiracy orchestrated by Charles Mendoza and his accomplices. She opened her computer again, determined to dig deeper. The screen displayed a series of files. Some of the documents were encrypted, but what she could read was already enough to make her shudder. The first document she opened was a list of massive payments, accompanied by the names of influential officials and figures in the region. Charles wasn't just wealthy, he was the central figure in a vast network of corruption. He used money to bribe police, judges, and journalists, turning them into tools to protect him. Lucy continued scrolling through the images stored in a separate folder. One photo stopped her cold. Alfred, her husband, was pictured at a private meeting surrounded by familiar faces including Charles. The date on the photo was just 1 week before Alfred's accidental death in a car crash. This photo was a critical piece of the puzzle, suggesting that Alfred might have known too much about Charles and his network. The pain tore through Lucy's mind, but she refused to let herself break. "I have to know the whole truth," she told herself, her fingers trembling as she continued to click. Another file, a video, appeared on the screen. It was surveillance footage showing Alfred in a heated argument with Charles in a luxurious office. Although there was no sound, Alfred's furious expression was unmistakable, while Charles remained calm but with a menacing gleam in his eyes. The video ended with Charles signaling to two burly men, who forcibly removed Alfred from the room. Lucy couldn't take it anymore, she broke down in tears, her hands covering her face. "Alfred," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt as if she were reliving the day he died. But this time, the pain wasn't just from loss, it was from the betrayal of those they had once trusted. Lucy decided to share what she had found with Carmen and David. That evening, the three of them met at James's bakery, which had become their unofficial headquarters. Lucy brought her old laptop and showed them the documents and images. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as the full extent of the truth came to light. "My God, Alfred really didn't die in an accident," Carmen said, her hands trembling as she clutched a handkerchief. "Charles had him killed, because he knew too much." David was silent, stunned by the gravity of the situation. "We have to do something," he said, his voice filled with determination. "What Lucy has could be the key evidence to expose him. But we need to be cautious," James added. "Charles has a lot of power. If he finds out we have this, he won't just sit back." Lucy nodded. "I know. But I can't let fear stop me. Alfred gave his life for this. I won't let his death be meaningless." David proposed launching a media campaign, using social platforms to make public everything they had uncovered. Carmen agreed to help by using the upcoming concert to draw more attention to the cause. James took on the task of connecting with other community members to garner support. But as their plan began to take shape, Charles didn't remain idle. The next morning, Lucy received an anonymous letter. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short, chilling message. "Stop, or face the consequences." Lucy clutched the note tightly, her eyes blazing with anger. "Does he think I'll be scared?" she muttered. Without hesitation, she called Carmen, David, and James to inform them of the threat. The group resolved to press forward, united in their determination not to back down. That night, Lucy opened her computer once more, searching through the files she hadn't yet reviewed. In a hidden folder, she found an audio recording. Charles's voice rang out, clear and menacing. "If Alfred doesn't keep his mouth shut, make sure he never gets the chance to speak again. I don't care how you do it, just make sure it's clean." Lucy's heart clenched as she heard those words. This was the most direct evidence linking Charles to Alfred's death. She immediately copied the recording onto another device and hid it carefully. There was no way Charles could escape justice any longer. The truth was clear, but Lucy's battle was just beginning. She knew the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but for Alfred, Martin, and justice, she was ready to face it all. That night, Lucy sat motionless in the dim room, the light from the computer screen casting a pale glow on her tired face. Each piece of evidence she had uncovered felt like a dagger twisting in her mind. Yet amid the pain and anger, Lucy clung to the hope that she would find a clearer answer about the truth behind Alfred's death. She couldn't sleep, her eyes glued to the screen, as though staring long enough might conjure some miracle. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Lucy jolted upright, her heart pounding. It was late. Who could be visiting at this hour? Her legs trembled as she walked toward the door, fear and anxiety coursing through her. "It's me, Lucy," a voice called from the other side. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. That voice, it was unmistakable. Lucy opened the door, and there he was, Alfred, the husband she had mourned for years. He stood there, his hair grayer than before, his face etched with the lines of time and weariness. But his eyes still shone with the same warmth she remembered. Lucy couldn't believe her eyes. "Alfred," she gasped, her voice hoarse. "How is this possible? You're..." "Lucy," Alfred interrupted, his voice trembling. "I know you have a lot of questions. But let me explain." Lucy felt like she was caught in an emotional storm. She didn't know whether to cry, scream, or throw her arms around him. In the end, she stood frozen, her tear-filled eyes fixed on him. "Come in," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Come in before someone sees you." Alfred stepped inside, his movements heavy, burdened by the years of secrets he had carried. He sat down in the small living room, his hands clasped tightly together. Lucy sat across from him, her gaze never leaving his face. "Talk," she said, her voice trembling. "Where have you been? Why did you let us think you were dead?" Alfred took a deep breath, as if gathering every ounce of courage he had. "Lucy, I never wanted to leave you and Martin," he began, his voice laden with sorrow. "But I had no choice. Charles discovered that I knew about his corruption network. He sent threats, saying that if I didn't stay silent, our whole family would be in danger." Lucy froze, her hands clenching into fists. "You let them think you were dead to protect us?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Yes," Alfred nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I thought if I disappeared, Charles would leave you and Martin alone. But I soon realized he didn't just want silence, he wanted to eliminate any potential threat to him entirely." Alfred explained how he had enlisted the help of a close friend in the medical field to fake his death. Afterward, he lived in hiding in a remote countryside area, spending years gathering more evidence against Charles. But when he learned that Lucy had found the USB, Alfred knew it was time to return, no matter the danger. "You can't do this alone, Lucy," Alfred said, his voice firm. "Charles isn't just dangerous, he's ruthless. He'll stop at nothing to protect himself. But I've collected enough evidence to expose him, and now, with what you found, we finally have a real chance to take him down. Lucy looked at Alfred, tears streaming down her face. You have no idea how much I've suffered, thinking you were gone, she said, her voice breaking. But if this can bring justice, I'll do whatever it takes. Alfred took her hands, his eyes filled with determination. We'll do this together. Not just for me, but for Martin and everyone Charles has hurt. The next morning, Alfred met with Carmen, David, and James to present his plan. He shared the documents and information he had collected over the years, including a list of Charles's accomplices. The group worked tirelessly, developing a detailed strategy to bring Charles's crimes to light. David, with his filmmaking skills, began editing a video compiling all the evidence they had. Carmen prepared her speech for the upcoming concert, while James continued reaching out to the community to rally support. For the first time in years, Lucy and Alfred worked together as a team, determined to fight to the end. But danger loomed. Charles, noticing Lucy's unusual silence, began sending people to follow her. One evening, while Alfred was at James's house discussing plans, Lucy received an ominous phone call. The voice on the other end was cold and menacing. We know he's alive. Don't think you can win. Lucy hung up, her heart racing. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She knew she wasn't alone anymore. With Alfred's return, she felt a renewed strength to fight. They would face whatever came their way for justice and for their family. News of Charles Mendoza's cruelty spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood, thanks to the videos David had released on social media. Conversations buzzed across the community, from casual chats at James's bakery to heated discussions in small coffee shops. Outrage grew, and people felt compelled to take action against Charles's oppressive power. This was no longer just Lucy's story, it had become a collective fight for the entire community. Carmen Sanchez, a highly respected figure in the neighborhood, took the lead in organizing a concert at the local cultural center. The event was not only a fundraiser but also a way to attract media attention and human rights organizations. With her talent and connections, Carmen quickly reached out to several well-known artists in the area. Music can inspire and unite people, she said during a meeting with the group. We'll turn this event into a rallying cry for justice. Meanwhile, David worked tirelessly. The videos he edited spread rapidly, garnering thousands of views and comments. Charles can't hide forever, David said, his eyes filled with determination. We need to make sure the public sees the truth about him. James Ruiz, with his extensive connections in the neighborhood, began rallying people to sign a petition to send to the authorities. He knocked on doors, explaining the situation and persuading those who were hesitant. We need to stand up for justice, not just for Lucy, but for the future of this community, James said, his eyes shining with passion as he saw the growing support. Lucy and Alfred were endlessly grateful for everyone's help. Despite their exhaustion, they worked tirelessly to ensure that every step was meticulously planned. The strength of the community is something Charles can't control, Alfred said to Lucy one quiet evening. That's our hope. On the day of the concert, Union Square was packed with people. Music echoed across the square, interwoven with chants calling for justice. Journalists and representatives from human rights organizations arrived, capturing the emotional moments. It was the first step, but it marked a critical turning point in their fight against Charles. The following day, they found themselves at the crossroads leading to the abandoned industrial area, where Charles Mendoza was attempting to destroy the most crucial evidence that could put him behind bars. From behind, Carmen and James quietly approached. Carmen placed a reassuring hand on Lucy's shoulder. We can't fail, Lucy. The entire community is counting on us. James held a flashlight, its faint beam serving as a reminder of what they were about to face. David, with his camera in hand, stood ready to document everything. He knew these images would be undeniable evidence if everything went according to plan. Lucy led the way, moving swiftly but cautiously through the dark, cold paths. Shadows loomed around them, interrupted only by the dim glow of distant streetlights. The crunching of their footsteps on the gravel heightened the tense atmosphere. Each step felt like an eternity, prolonging the anticipation. Alfred walked closely behind Lucy, gripping a wooden stick tightly, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. As the group drew closer, the abandoned warehouse came into view. The decrepit building, with its cracked walls and boarded-up windows, looked like a silent witness to both time and crime. A faint light from inside the warehouse confirmed Charles was there. Lucy signaled the group to stop. "David, start filming from outside. James, block the back entrance. Alfred, come with me to the front," she whispered, quickly delegating tasks. The group nodded in agreement. Carmen, despite her fear, stayed close to David, ready to assist if needed. The front door creaked open as Lucy and Alfred stepped inside. In the eerie silence, the sound of their footsteps on the cement floor echoed sharply. Lucy kept her breathing slow and shallow, her eyes scanning every corner. Charles stood in the center of the warehouse, a small fire burning in a metal barrel before him. He held a stack of documents, his eyes flickering with urgency and malice. "Charles Mendoza." Lucy called out, her voice echoing through the warehouse. Charles flinched and turned, his eyes flashing with fear for a split second before regaining his usual confidence. "Well, what a surprise, Lucy," he said mockingly. "What brings you here? Are you here to demand justice? Or just to watch me turn your dreams into ashes?" "That's enough, Charles," Lucy said firmly, her voice filled with anger but steady. "We know everything. The evidence here won't disappear, and the entire community knows the truth. Even if you burn everything here, the truth will still come out." Charles smirked, tossing the documents into the fire. "You really think you can stop me?" he said, stepping toward Lucy with slow, deliberate strides, trying to intimidate her with his menacing glare. "You're just a small, powerless woman. You have no idea who you're dealing with." At that moment, Alfred stepped forward, placing himself between Charles and Lucy. "You're wrong, Charles," he said, his voice calm and firm. "Your power is gone. You've abused it for far too long. Now, it's time to pay the price." Charles's smirk faltered as a noise from behind caught his attention. David, still filming, had moved into a corner of the warehouse and was capturing everything. From outside, Carmen shouted. "We've already called the police, Charles. You won't get away." Charles stepped back, his composure beginning to crack. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. Just then, James appeared at the back entrance, blocking his way. "Not so fast, Mendoza," James said, his voice firm. Charles shouted in frustration, losing all semblance of control. "Who do you think you are? I won't let you destroy me." He grabbed a metal rod from a nearby table and charged at Lucy. Alfred moved quickly, pushing Lucy aside and using his wooden stick to defend himself. The two men clashed in a tense struggle. Charles swung the rod, but Alfred dodged and countered with a precise strike to Charles's hand, causing him to drop the weapon. Charles fell to the ground, gasping for breath. Before he could get up, the glare of police car lights flooded the entrance. Officers stormed in, fully armed. One officer stepped forward, signaling Charles's arrest. "Charles Mendoza, you are under arrest for corruption, assault, and other charges," the officer announced. Charles shouted in protest, but it was futile. The officers quickly handcuffed him and began searching the warehouse. Lucy stood still, watching as Charles was led away, her emotions swirling. She turned to look at Alfred, then at Carmen, David, and James. Together, they had accomplished the unimaginable, taking down a man of immense power and bringing hope to their community. "We did it," Carmen said, tears streaming down her face. Lucy took her hand and nodded. "But this is only the beginning. The group left the warehouse, the flashing police lights illuminating the road ahead, a symbol of the justice that was finally on its way. The courtroom was packed. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, brightening the space that was thick with anticipation and tension. Charles Mendoza sat at the defendant's table, his once arrogant demeanor completely gone. In its place was a weary face, his deep-set eyes filled with defeat. He wore a gray suit, but it couldn't hide the nervous energy in his every movement. On the other side of the courtroom, Lucy sat next to Alfred, her hand gripping his tightly as if drawing strength from him. This was the day they had waited for, a day when justice would finally prevail. Behind them, David, Carmen, and James sat in the gallery, their eyes fixed on every moment unfolding before them. Together, they had endured countless hardships to reach this moment. The trial began. The prosecutor stepped forward, his powerful voice resonating throughout the room. Charles Mendoza, you are charged with a series of crimes, including corruption, bribery, violence, and involvement in organized murders. We have clear evidence to prove that you abused your power for years to manipulate the legal system, threaten, and harm innocent people. Lucy's heart pounded as she listened. She looked over at Charles, but he kept his head down, unable to meet her gaze. The evidence collected by Lucy and her team was presented to the court. From the videos David had recorded to the documents in the USB Lucy had found, each piece formed an undeniable case against him. When the video of Charles ordering the destruction of documents at the warehouse was played on the large courtroom screen, a heavy silence fell over the room. The footage showed Charles shouting, his face contorted with rage, as he poured gasoline over the pile of documents. "Burn it all. Leave nothing behind," his voice thundered in the video, a self-incriminating confession that left no room for doubt. The prosecutor turned toward Charles. "Do you have anything to say in your defense, Mr. Mendoza?" he asked sharply, leaving no room for evasion. Charles hesitated, then shook his head. His voice was hoarse as he finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "I have nothing to say." It was the moment when all his remaining hope crumbled. The trial continued with witness testimonies. Carmen took the stand, her voice clear and filled with emotion. Charles abused his power to threaten and harm the people of this community. He thought no one could ever touch him, but today, we've proven him wrong. James and David also testified about what they had witnessed and endured during their fight against Charles. They emphasized that justice was not only about punishing criminals but also about restoring the community's faith in the legal system. Finally, Lucy was called to the stand. She took a deep breath and stood with a resolute posture. "Charles Mendoza didn't just destroy my life and my family's. He used his power to harm countless others in this community. But I stand here today not just for myself but for everyone who has suffered because of him. We want justice, and we won't stop until it is served." After hours of arguments and deliberation, the judge finally delivered the verdict. Charles Mendoza was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sound of the gavel striking the bench was like a final blow to his reign of terror. Lucy felt a heavy weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to Alfred, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. Alfred took her hand and nodded. "We've reclaimed justice for Alfred, for Martin, and for everyone he has hurt." But it wasn't over yet. The trial not only marked the end of Charles's tyranny but also initiated a broader investigation. Many high-ranking officials who had collaborated with Charles were exposed. The corrupt system he had built began to crumble, paving the way for reforms to protect the community. Carmen organized a small gathering at the community center to thank everyone who had contributed to their fight. During the event, she spoke. "We didn't just defeat one man. We dismantled a system of corruption that had persisted for far too long. But what makes me most proud isn't the result, it's the unity we've built. It was our collective strength that made justice possible." The crowd erupted into applause, each person expressing their solidarity. In the audience, David smiled, satisfied. He had recorded Carmen's speech and was ready to share this moment with people across the country. David later turned the story into a documentary titled "Justice Cannot Be Forgotten." The film quickly gained widespread attention, inspiring other communities across Spain to stand up for justice. As for James, he expanded his bakery, transforming it into not just a place for bread but also a hub for community gatherings. "This isn't just a place to eat," he said. "It's a space to build something good." Lucy returned to her daily life, but her heart was lighter. "Justice has finally been served," she told Alfred one peaceful afternoon as they sat together. "And now we can live without fear." Union Square basked in the morning sunlight. The first rays illuminated the central monument, a silent witness to countless events, now glowing with a renewed spirit. Colorful banners hung high, bearing the words, "United for Justice and the Future." The fresh air mingled with lively chatter and laughter. The community gathered, preparing for the most significant celebration since the historic trial that brought Charles Mendoza to light. Lucy stood beside Alfred, her eyes sparkling with joy. "It's finally here," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "The day when we can all hold our heads high, unafraid of evil." Alfred nodded, his hand holding hers tightly. "We've come a long way. But this isn't just our victory, it belongs to everyone here." The event began with a brief but heartfelt speech from Carmen Sanchez, the music teacher who had been at the forefront of the fight against injustice. Standing at the podium, Carmen surveyed the square, where hundreds of people listened intently. "We didn't just triumph over one man, we dismantled a corrupt system that had lasted far too long," she said, her voice ringing with strength. "But what fills me with pride isn't just the result, it's the unity we've created. It was through our collective strength that justice was achieved." Applause thundered through the square, each clap a testament to the community's unity. Among the crowd, David smiled, satisfied as he filmed Carmen's speech, ready to share this moment across the nation. Next came the concert Carmen had painstakingly organized. Melodious tunes filled the air, a tribute to resilience and solidarity. Lucy sat in the front row, alongside Alfred and Martin. The boy, now stronger after all they had endured, listened intently to the music, his eyes shining as he heard the song Carmen had composed especially for this day. "How do you feel, Martin?" Lucy asked, smiling warmly at her son. "I'm proud of you, Mom," the boy replied, his voice clear and heartfelt. "You and everyone else did something I thought was impossible." Martin's words moved Lucy deeply. She gently brushed his hair, feeling an overwhelming sense of hope in her heart. It was the younger generation, like Martin, who represented the future, and she believed that what they had accomplished today would lay the foundation for a better community. James Ruiz was also at the heart of the celebration. Over the past days, his bakery had become a meeting place for sharing ideas and rallying people to join the event. Today, he stood behind the bakery counter, serving freshly baked goods to everyone. "Celebrate, but remember this is a responsibility we all share," he told a group of people waiting in line. "We must uphold the values we fought to protect." The day's activities unfolded one after another, from musical performances to speeches from community representatives. The centerpiece of the event, however, was the unveiling of a large board in the middle of the square. On it was a photo of Martin, accompanied by the words, "Courage and Justice." David stepped forward, holding a microphone, and shared the significance of the board. "Martin is not just a victim but a symbol of courage. Through the pain he endured, we realized that our community needed to change. This isn't just the story of one family, it's the story of all of us." Lucy looked at the picture of her son, her heart swelling with pride. It wasn't just an image of Martin, it was a symbol of everything they had fought to achieve. The community of Seville was no longer a place ruled by fear and injustice. It had become a beacon of hope for other communities. The event concluded with a collective song, as everyone raised their voices in unison, blending joy and hope. Lucy stood amidst the crowd, feeling the warmth of the people around her. They had endured the darkest of days together, and now, the light of unity illuminated the path ahead. At home, Lucy and Alfred sat together on the sofa, their hands still intertwined. "Do you think Charles will ever truly change in prison?" she asked. Alfred shook his head, then looked at his wife with a gentle expression. "Probably not. But what's important is that what we've done will help prevent others like him. More importantly, we've given Martin a lesson in courage and the power of unity." Lucy smiled and rested her head on Alfred's shoulder. "You're right. We haven't just reclaimed justice, we've also reclaimed hope for this community." Outside, the streetlights illuminated every corner of the neighborhood. Seville was no longer just a city, it was now a symbol of unity and the power of ordinary people to bring about extraordinary change. This story stands as a testament to the strength of solidarity and courage. It teaches us that when people come together to fight for justice, no power can hide the truth or overshadow righteousness. Despite hardships and dangers, faith and unity serve as the foundation that enables us to overcome anything. Justice not only delivers punishment to the wicked but also opens the door to a brighter future where kindness and truth are celebrated.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.